from Detroit, Michigan, George Howard. From Cleveland, Ohio, Don Scott. Two more of the world's greatest bowlers on championship bowling in a three-game match. From the Firestone Bowlerama Lanes in Akron, Ohio. Hello, everybody. From Akron, Ohio, it's championship bowling. This is Fred Wolf with two more of our field of 24 of the world's greatest bowlers in weekly competition, going for a purse of over $70,000. The winner this week, as usual, gets $1,000. The loser, $500. 5 strikes in a row in any one game, the start of a $250 bonus with $50 additional for each additional strike. For a 300 game, $10,000. All competition is sanctioned, of course, by the American Bowling Congress. Now, each bowler will make 2 appearances. The total for the 6 games will qualify our 2 finalists for a $15,000 added purse during the final 2 weeks here in Akron, Ohio. Working with us again this week from St. Louis, Pat Patterson. Patrick, how are you?
Nice to be back again.
Welcome back. Well, being a big fellow like you are, we're going to look at a couple of little boys here this week.
I think we're going to have proof this week that it doesn't take brawn to be a good bowler.
Doesn't take muscles.
No, Georgie is the littlest man we have on the Professional Bowlers Tour, and he's one of the best. So
what's he check in at? About 110, 12?
With his bowling ball.
With his bowling ball. Pat, you get up there, and we'll be ready to go here in a minute. Let's have the folks meet these 2 boys. Speaking of George Howard, they call him the Splinter, they call him the Toothpick, they call him... Well, some of the boys that bowl against him have other words for him because he bowls pretty good. From Detroit, Michigan, George Howard.
This week.
Welcome back to championship bowling.
It's always a pleasure to get on this show, you know.
Well, you've done some great work for us here, and we're looking for something pretty big this week.
I sure hope I can give it for the fans here.
Now, we have an opponent for you from Cleveland, Ohio. Let's bring him out. Don Scott. Donald? Boy, how are you? Well, this is your first appearance on championship bowling. You not nervous or anything like that?
Oh, I'm plenty nervous.
You are nervous,
Plenty
really?
nervous, yeah.
Well, you got such a little guy here. It should be kind of easy.
I've seen the little guy with his great big ball.
You've seen him. All right, now everybody has seen our 2 boys this week. Let's give them a real Akron welcome, and we'll be underway with the first game of 3. All right, boys? Ready for the first game of 3, championship bowling from Akron, Ohio. Don Scott won the toss, elected to start on the right side. All games starting on the left puts George Howard on the left, lane 25. Ready, the big turn, it'll get there. Not enough. The 2 and the 5, the bucket, and he ends up with nothing but the 5 pin. George Howard from Detroit. We have him checked in here at 108 pounds. I believe his weight fluctuates somewhat between 108 and 112. Pat, is that about right?
I think so, Fred. It never gets too high.
Well, he's got a lot of nicknames. Peanuts, Sliver, Toothpick, the Wisp of the bowling world, the 5 pin he covers. Here is Don Scott from Cleveland, Ohio. Don checks in at about 155 pounds, so he has an advantage in the weight department. They call him Scotty, making his first appearance on championship bowling. As a matter of fact, his first appearance on television. A little on the high side, almost on the jersey or the Brooklyn, leaves the 6 pin. Born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1927, went to school here in Akron, Ohio. In 1944, he went back to Cleveland. Has a daughter, Avis. His wife, Velma, is in the audience. She's a beginner, and Don started as a pin boy. He's got it. Well, he didn't get much of it.
Just enough, though, Fred. Just takes a little bit.
Well, I'm sure that Don is glad the first frame is over at least. He's admitted to extreme nervousness, and this is understandable. It's a big opportunity for this youngster. young fella who incidentally is an interior decorator, member of the PBA, and also a proprietor. Here he comes. How about that? Yes, sir.
That was a good ball, Fred. Maybe that first shot loosened him up a little bit.
Well, I'm sure there's a difference. Had he missed the spare, I'm sure he'd have been under tremendous pressure. He's under enough pressure as it is. That just might have given him a little life to get him off to a good start. George Howard playing extreme inside. Interesting to see how George plays the right side. Looks like a third diamond, right around the third diamond. He sets it. He's got it. Well, let's take a look at Howard. He was born in Bridgeport, Tennessee in 1930. In 1946, went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and 56 to Detroit, where he really became one of the nation's great stars. For the double, Howard throws. He's there, and he has two. Well, we do mention many times, and I'm sure that Pat will agree with me, when you start a show like this, the first thing is to get the first strike. That's the first assignment. The second assignment, get your double as quick as you possibly can. Howard did that. He made good his first strike. Let's see if Scott can do the same thing. He did, and both boys are off with two. Well, they answered the challenge beautifully here with their first doubles. Pat?
Very good, Fred. They both got about the same line. Don's outside just a little bit more than Georgie is, but they're both playing farther left than a lot of the bowlers have played.
Don's big ambition is to win a national PBA title. He's won many titles in the National Bowling Association. He's been the Midwest Singles Champion in an event he won in Chicago, and the Cleveland Champion, Cincinnati Champion, and he doesn't get there with that one. Just a little short of the pocket, leaves the 2 and the 8. Here's a pretty difficult shot.
It's not the easiest one in the books, I'll tell you. You have to hit that 2-pin right on the nose. Or if you've got your ball hooking pretty good, you can get it on the right side, and it'll carry through to knock out the 8-pin.
Call that a blind one or a mother-in-law. They have a lot of names for that, don't they, Pat? Looks like
there, he's got it.
Well, that's what they tell you in the book. Hit both pins with the ball, and Don did that. And George Howard now moves to the right side. George is on 2. He can take the lead here with a third strike. And a very popular boy. Look at that, a solid 10-pin. Really in there, and George is a little unhappy with that one. And there's reason to be.
Yeah, that's a stubborn old 10-pin, Fred. We see a lot of those.
Got a good look at that 6-pin. It was actually in midair, right in front of it. Sometimes unbelievable how that pin can stay up there.
Well, it actually is. The 6-pin wraps around the neck of the 10-pin. It doesn't catch the belly the way we want it to.
At the 10, Howard has the spare. So at the end of 4 frames, it's Howard, 69 spare, Don Scott, 68 spare. Our statistician, as usual, Sam Trophy, the pro here at the Firestone Bowlorama Lanes in Akron, Ohio. In the 5th. Right back there. He looks like he's pretty good shape here, Pat. He's been in that pocket beautifully now, 4 in a row.
Has. And the first game, too. So when you're stringing the first game, it means you've got a real good chance for a big set.
Back
Get him
to
early.
Don Scott on the right side. The margin is only 1 pin. That's out there. Beautiful ball. Beautiful.
That was the best ball Don's thrown so far, Fred. The other 2 strikes he got, he was a little bit over the top of the ball, but they held right in the pocket. But he threw that one very good.
At the end of 5, let's take a look at it here. Scott is 88 strike. Howard is 89 strike. We're in the 6th. First game of 3. Championship bowling from Akron, Ohio. He got there. Look at that action. Yes, sir. This boy really fights for his strikes, doesn't he, Pat?
He sure does.
Well, it looks like little Georgie's going to have his hands full with this fella. Howard needs this one to keep that 1-pin advantage. He's going to be there. He's there. I don't know whether our microphones picked it up, but George is talking to those pins. He screamed out, "Carry." And he could very well have 5 in a row. You know, Pat, this fella back in 1951 won the Kalamazoo Bantamweight Golden Gloves title.
Yes, I know, Fred. He's always picking on me, and I don't fight back because he's tough.
Get to be a little scrapper. Be careful. Careful! 4-pin, just a bit high. George knew that the instant he let it go. Thought he might kick the 4 out of there. You know, the American Cancer Society's slogan is fight cancer with a checkup and a check. Now, this is the best insurance that we have of finding a cure and ultimately a preventive for this terrible disease. The cover for Howard in the 7th. In our audience this week here in Akron, Ohio, very happy to have Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Firestone, president of the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Great bowling enthusiasts. Don Scott now on 2. He can take the lead with this one. Look out. A little high, and the 4-pin stops Scott. Well, there were a couple of hits just about the same, and the same result.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of 4-pins, Fred. 4s and 10s. That seems to be the pro bowler's nemesis. In fact, you go to sleep saying that some night.
Well, the 4-pin is obviously a little high. I suppose the boys can take that, but that solid 10-pin wrap can get you pretty concerned. There's the cover. So we have a great match going here. It's still 1 pin. 138 spare for Howard, 137 spare for Scott. We're in the 8th frame. Here he comes. Look at that. We also see sitting over there in the front row and getting quite enthusiastic, Mr. and Mrs. E.B. Hathaway, Executive Vice President of Firestone, along with Mr. Charles Ryan, Director of Advertising. Watching little George Howard. Could call him the thermometer, too, couldn't we, Pat?
We got a lot of nicknames for Georgie.
Gotta hurry, George. Oh, he was a little deep on that one.
Yeah, he got there a little ahead of it, too, Fred. He went over the top of the balls. He threw it, and he knows it.
This little guy's a regular on the PBA Tour. On the 1964 Winter Tour, he picked up over $6,000. In 63, he won $15,000. In 62, he won $20,000. There it is. That's putting the ball right between the pins that he was concerned about, especially the 2-5, picking the 2 off the 5. So Howard has a spare. He has lost 3 pins in counts. Scott has now taken the lead as we go into the 9th. Howard has won the Las Vegas Open, the Niagara Falls Open, the San Jose Open. He's been runner-up twice, the Winston-Salem Open and the Canadian Open. There it is. So Georgie gets the big key strike in the 9th frame. He's out of the bonus department. If he goes all the way, he'll only have 4 in a row, but he has a chance for 235. Scott, in the meantime, working on 1 in the 8th, has room for $250 additional in bonus money, but he must go all the way. In the 9th, little high, and he breaks up the 4-7-10. Well, he's had 2 of them in a row, a little tight there. That 4-pin.
Don's rolling a nice slow ball. He'll carry good, but I think he slowed up a little bit more on that one.
Looked that way, just a little too slow. This fellow's a musician, too. He plays the bass in his spare time, in addition to being an interior decorator, a proprietor, a member of the PBA, and a member of the AMF staff of champions. So we go into the 10th. Now Howard has the advantage. Although he trails by 2 pins, he is on a strike in the 9th. Scott is on the spare. Both boys have the 200 game locked up. Fingertip, Don Scott doesn't get there, and he has the 2-4-5. Howard turned this one in the 8th frame. Scott looks at it here in the 10th. So Howard will need a spare and a good count to win the first game. Covers it. Very good angle on that bat, moving to the extreme left, and that, of course, cuts down the chance of picking the 2 off the 5.
Right, Fred. You'll find a lot of pros shoot it that way, although when we teach people, we always tell them to throw from the right-hand side because it's much easier for them, for a beginner or a once-a-week bowler.
Scott in the 10th. The count 2-14, throws it out. He's high again and snake eyes, and that's a good place for that one, the 7-10. Well, that doesn't hurt Scott too much. 2-12. His first appearance on championship bowling. Don Scotty Scott from Cleveland, Ohio, and here's George Howard. Fingertip, very wide span. In fact, the holes for his fingers, did you notice, Pat? They're about a half-inch diameter. Come on, get up there. He doesn't get there again, and he has the 2-5 this time. So Howard, unable to take advantage, has a word or two to say to something down there.
One thing about Georgie, Fred, he doesn't have any trouble finding a bowling ball wherever he goes. He can always use a lady's ball.
Yes.
His fingers are about the same size.
All right, let's see how George handles this. He converted this in the 8th, actually with the 4-pin, which doesn't mean much. The idea is to put, look out, he's going on the outside. Oh, man, he just made that. Oh, he gave that one a little jerk.
See, now there's your trouble when you throw up on the left-hand side, Fred. You can make a mistake. Even the pros do it. It's not a real good angle to be real accurate, but it does cut the chance of chopping the 2 off the 5 down.
Now, the average bowler would have walked away from that saying, well, I got my spare, and say nothing about it. But a pro knows that that's not where he was throwing the ball. They shoot to cover the 2 pins. He's out there again. This time, the 1-2 and the 8, a 7-pin count, and we have a dead heat. 2-12 for George Howard and 2-12 for Don Scott. Fred Wolf, along with Pat Patterson. Championship Bowling, television's #1 bowling show, coming to you from the Firestone Lanes in Akron, Ohio, the rubber capital of the world. The scores for the first game. We have a dead heat. George Howard, 2-12. Don Scott, 2-12. The statistics look about the same way. Both boys with 2 doubles. They both had 5 strikes. So we'll start it all over. Game number 2 from Akron, Ohio, championship bowling. Are you ready, Akron? Don Scott, Cleveland, Ohio, starting off game number 2. Both boys with 2-12 in the first game. Scott on the left side. The big turn, it'll get there. And he leaves the 10-pin a little wide on that one. Don Scotty Scott from Cleveland, Ohio, where he was born, went to school here in Akron, Ohio at the Central High School, attended Fisk University in Nashville. His high 3 games in sanctioned competition, 7-42. The 10-pin he covered. And Georgie Howard, the little guy, they call him, from Detroit, Michigan. George was born down in Bridgeport, Tennessee, back in 1930. Won his first title in 1951, the Kalamazoo Singles Championship, Kalamazoo, Michigan. Averaging 2-12 for 24 games on championship bowling. There's a good turn. He gets there and leaves the 5-pin. That ball managed to get to the pocket. He's been sliding away from there a couple of times, Pat.
It looks like he's just a little bit ahead of it, Fred, and his hand is going over the top of the ball instead of lifting from the side. The ball's not quite coming in.
At the 5, the spare. All competition here on championship bowling, sanctioned by the American Bowling Congress. Each bowler rolls 2 complete frames. Each game is started on the left side. That bowler bowls 1 frame, takes his seat. His opponent then moves from right to left, our right to left. And that's the way the competition continues throughout the 3 games. As we say many times, it's a game of offense only. There is no defense. Oh, he threw that one away. Managed to get it up there, and look what we have here.
Oh, that's the 4-pin that slid into the 5-pin spot.
That's right. That's what it looked like. What do I establish? That he left the 2-4-5? George Howard at the 2-4-5, and he made it going away again. That's twice that Howard twice that Howard has gone past the 2-5. So at the end of the second frame, it's Howard 17 spare as Don Scott moves in on the right side. Looks like it's there. And Scott has himself a strike. I noticed, Pat, right after he released that one, he looked at his hand. Now, is he concerned about the position of his hand after he released the ball?
That may have been, Fred. It could be. He sure threw that ball nice. He came out of it very clean. If he keeps throwing like that, he's going to give Georgie some trouble.
Scott now moves to the left. It's a tie game at the end of the first game, 2-12 apiece. Scott now has taken the lead, and he's on a strike. Howard on a spare. We're in the third. Here it comes. Look at Scott. Don Scotty Scott from Cleveland, Ohio. Playing that left side a little more to the around the second diamond, Pat. I noticed that.
Every time he's struck Fred, he's been around the second diamond. The ones that don't come up, he's closer to the third, so he's probably drifting left a little bit on some of his pitches.
The little guy from Detroit, George Howard, now has a problem. He's got to catch Mr. Scott. Here he comes, and he leaves the 10-pin. A little deep. That ball didn't move too much. The old in-betweener. A little thinner. He might have had a good crack at it. Championship bowling from Akron, Ohio. Over the years, you've watched championship bowling from Chicago, Coral Gables, Florida, Winston-Salem, Paramus, New Jersey, Toledo, Ohio, Parkersburg, West Virginia, Chicago Heights, Skokie, Illinois, Louisville, Kentucky, Northbrook, Illinois. There's the cover. The world's greatest bowlers in action every week. A purse of some $70,000. Both these boys will make a second appearance, meeting a different opponent. The top two scorers for their 2 appearances or 6 games will qualify for the finals, the final 2 weeks of the series here in Akron, Ohio, with a $15,000 added purse. We're in the fourth. Scott out in front. Howard on a spare. Sets it, and he's there for the strike. I notice Horgy has moved a little outside.
You got that ball real left. Yeah. 25 comes real nice when you're right around that second arrow.
Don Scott now moving in on the right, on his way to bonus money. He needs 3 more strikes, $250 for 5 in a row in any one game. $50 additional for every strike. Here's the turn. He's got that 3rd strike, and he seems very happy with it. And he moves to the left, and he's piling up a margin. Now has 24 pins on Howard, and we're almost halfway. Averaged 194 as a high school student. Started as a pin boy. Number 4? Yes, sir. So Don Scott now will be knocking on the door for bonus money when he's back up here as Howard takes a look at that scoreboard and realizes that it's about time. George having his problems here on the right side. Can't seem to get the ball up there. When he does, he's in between with the 10-pin leave. This time he's thin, and he leaves the 5-7. And Don Scott now beginning to pull away. George seems to be throwing a slider over here. Pat?
I think he's in a little farther left, Fred, than he wants to be, because in practice he was hitting 26 better than 25.
Moving to the extreme left. The AMS Sparemaker indicates hit the 5-pin on the right side. Way out there. Here it comes. And he just hit that 5-pin a little too thin. And Howard did not make the 5-7. The first open frame of the match, a good try for Howard in the 5th, 84. For Don Scott, a spare in the first, and he works on 4 in a row. We're in the 6th frame of the second game, into the second half. George Howard from Detroit leaves the 8-pin solid, and that's what we call a tap. Is that right, Pat?
Fred, that was a tap. I'll tell you, when you're going bad, sometimes you can't do a thing. That ball was as perfect as you could put it, and that 8-pin never even wiggled. That's put it this way, he should have had it.
At the 8th pin, Howard covers the spare. And now all eyes here in Akron, Ohio, at the Firestone Bolorama Lanes, watching Don Scott in his first appearance on Championship Bowling. 4 in a row. He needs this one to start a $250 bonus. I think he's going to squeeze this one a little extra hard, Pat. Here's the turn.
He got it.
Here he comes. He's there. And that's $270. That'll go back to Cleveland, Ohio. Don Scott.
That ball was no different than the other 4. It was beautiful.
So now every strike on top of the 5 is $50 additional. Moving to the left now. He's playing this lane more to the outside. Let's see if he stays there. Oh, he'll never get there. Almost got there. The 2-4-5.
There it was again, Fred. He was closer to the 3rd arrow that time than the 2nd again.
He really got over the top of that one, too.
I think he drifts left just a little bit at times, and then he tries to reach out to a spot, and he goes over the top of the ball.
This fellow started bowling as a pin boy. The owner of the Claredome Recreation, a fellow named George Jones, taught his pin boys how to bowl, because it seemed as though the pin boys always had... There's cover. Oh, just got it. Some years ago, that's quite a few years ago, 1942, the proprietors wanted to have good bowlers as pin boys because they had match games between pin boys, between the different bowling centers, and George Jones taught Mr. Scott very well, and Don likes to give him all the credit he possibly can. We're in the 7th. A little slow, George, but he got there and carried. Now Howard just shook his head on that when he gave it up.
That ball rolled about 62 feet, Fred. It had just enough on it when it hit, then it carried him.
George shaking his head. He gave that one up, but he got away with it. We go into the 8th, and George has got to get that double here. He doesn't have a double in this game. So the little guy from the Motor City throws one right on the nose and leaves the 6-10, and Mr. Howard is completely confused here at the moment. How do we straighten him out, Pat?
Well, Fred, it's a trouble that we all get into. He's just a little bit ahead of the ball, and he's trying to force it out there now, and he's having trouble.
Speaking of pin boys, Howard started as a pin boy, too, in Kalamazoo, Michigan. There's the spare. Don Scott moving in now on the right side. Has himself a 53-pin advantage in the 8th frame of the 2nd game. Nice ball. Right there. No doubt about it.
He's got a beautiful line here on 26, Fred. If he keeps that ball around the 2nd arrow on 25, he's got both lanes down pretty well good.
A big turn hurry there. He's got it. So Don Scott now with another big strike in the 9th, and Pat, he still has room for another check-in at the bonus door there. He's got 2, and he has a chance for 3 more in the 10th, and he goes out on his favorite side.
That's right, Fred. He's got 2 spares this game, and they're both on lane 25, so he's hitting 26 every pitch.
That ought to set. 4-pin stops him.
Georgie threw that ball real good, though. I think he's a little bit satisfied with that one. Not the results, maybe, but the way he threw it was back to his old style again.
I'm sure that many of our viewers will notice that George's left arm is, he can't straighten it out, something he did as a youngster. Tried to play football. Told us he weighed about 88 pounds. And he got cracked up a little bit, but it sure hasn't bothered his bowling. But he's sure in trouble this game. There we are. That's the ball that George Howard is well known for. A lot of action.
Well, Georgie can still get a 190 game, Fred, but if Don goes all the way out, Georgie's really down.
He just turned his head away. He's forcing that ball. Of course, when your opponent is flying, like Don Scott is, it puts a fellow under tremendous pressure, and he feels he can't make another mistake, and the result is, of course, that you make that many more. The AMF Spearmaker indicates the ball between the 3 and the 6. He covers the 2 for 183. So Don Scott from Cleveland, Ohio, making quite an impression here, making his first appearance on Championship Bowling. A chance to cash in with bonus money twice in one game. Would give him 10 strikes. Get it up there. He leaves the 5-pin. Couldn't get that one up there.
He swung that one a little wide, Fred. He threw it all right, but he just went out a couple boards past his target. A nice, easy spare, though, that 5-pin.
The cover and count will give Scott 245. That'll give him 457 for the first 2. He even shoots that 5-pin from the deep inside angle. Rather unusual.
Yes, it is.
246 with a full count. This fellow led one of your qualifying rounds in the Cleveland PBA Open, Pat. He finished 9th in the finals back in 1961.
Yeah, that was our National Open, Fred. That was the second National Open we had. Don bowled very well in it.
He gets 9 of them for 245. So for George Howard, 183. For Don Scott, 245. Fred Wolf, along with Pat Patterson, Championship Bowling, coming to you from the Firestone Lanes in Akron, Ohio, the home of the Professional Bowlers Association. While we wait for the start of the 3rd and final game here on Championship Bowling in Akron, Ohio, we're now in Conversation Corner. We have a fine gentleman here by the name of Louis Shriver, who is a retiree and a member of the Senior Citizens League here at the Bowlerama. And Lou, they tell me you folks just have a lot of fun.
Yeah, we do. We have lots of fun, and I think it's good for you. And it's a good way to get acquainted with people that perhaps you'd never see or get acquainted with if you wasn't bowling. And it's something to look forward to.
What's about the average age of your group, Lou?
About 65.
65. Are there some folks who possibly never bowled before taking it up now?
Yes, there's people that never bowled before until after they're retired. And you'd be surprised how well they can bowl, too.
Well, I can understand that. It's easy to learn to bowl, and it's great fun.
Yeah, and it don't take them very long to catch on to it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lou. Lou Shriver here in Conversation Corner on Championship Bowling from Akron, Ohio. George Howard from Detroit starting the 3rd and final game. All games starting on the left side. Scott out in front by 62 pins. Howard having a lot of problems. Big turn, he's too high. He got away with it. What do you know about that? That's rather unusual for a pro to get on that Brooklyn side, isn't
Yes,
it,
it is, Fred. Right, you're right. But when you're playing as deep inside as Georgie is, you have a tendency to pull, and he pulled that one just enough.
Here's Don Scott, Cleveland, Ohio, has a comfortable margin for that $1,000, but pinfall is very important if he wants to make the finals. And boy, he went out on the scenic route that time.
Yes, he did. He threw that a little harder, too.
Yes, he's a great guy on a string of strikes. And the longer the string, the more he runs them out, as you fellas say. He'll let it run right out of the building. The 2, the 1, 2, 4, hurry, hurry! And there's the first miss of this match. The 1, 2, 4.
Right there, Fred. George has 11 pins back with a possibility to make it 21 if he can get a strike in the second frame.
Don now moves to the left side. Oh, hurry. And he's short again, this time the 2-5. He seems to be getting that ball behind him, Pat.
I think he's rushing up there in his approach just a little bit, Fred. He's, like you say, that ball's behind him when he gets to the foul line, so he has to either drop it or pull it across his body.
The AMF spare maker that helps you convert that important spare more easily indicates the ball between the 2 and the 5. And he did not do that, did he? He made that going away.
Don's smiling. I think he's a little worried, Fred.
He realized that he might have had 2 misses in a row. Now George Howard must make the move. He's on a strike. And Howard having all of his trouble on this side. He's there, and he's got that one, so look out for the little guy.
This was the first ball he's really thrown good in about 8 or 10 frames, Fred. That was a beauty.
So George Howard, who has now cut that margin down to 41 pins, a chance to make it 31 here in 2 frames. $1,000 to the winner. $500 to the loser. Both these boys return, meeting different opponents. Got to hurry. He kicked the 10 out of there. So look out for the little guy now as he starts with the first 3. He needs 2 more to cash in at the bonus department. Scott already with 5 in a row in the second game. He had a chance to get 5 in a row also in the second game, which is rather unusual. He had a chance for 10 strikes and 2 spares. He couldn't get the strike in the 10th. That's better. And he leaves the 7 pin, almost a 7-8, as he takes a look at his thumb. You think he's checking the position of his thumb after he gets out of the ball, Pat? I've never seen that before.
I don't know if it's a position or just that his thumb is coming out fast, and I think he's a little bit mad at his thumb. He wants to hold the ball just a little bit longer.
At the 7 pin, Don Scott from Cleveland, Ohio, covers the spare and moves to the left spot. Say, have you ever thought of having a bowling party? It's great fun. Don Scott moving left now, looking for his first strike here in the 3rd game. He went in with a 62-pin advantage. He's on top of that one. And he leaves the 2-5 again. The 5 is out, nothing but the 2-pin. And Don thought he might as well get another one.
That was a good break, Fred. He can pick this 2-pin real easy.
So now we have George Howard getting himself into position. Every strike he gets, he picks up 10 more pins. And that 62-pin margin could be practically wiped out if Howard gets 2 more. Picking up 60 pins in 5 frames is going pretty good, Pat.
It sure is.
Let's see what he can do here on the right side. He's worked very hard over here. He almost got away with it. He knew that it wasn't where he wanted it when he let it go, but the ball did reach the pocket. Didn't get the action he wanted on the left side, leaving the 7 pin. So Howard will have 32 of the 62 back with this conversion and 6 frames to go. There's the cover. That was a big strike for George. At the end of 4, Howard is 79 spare, Scott 47 spare. The margin, 30 pins. Scott is out in front. But Don's going to try to get enough before the 10th. Howard is on the nose, leaves the 10 pin. Boy, he slowed that one down, didn't he?
He sure did. I thought he was straightened out when he started with that turkey, but he's right back to that same trouble again. Rushing at foul line just a little bit.
Could have been the match right there. With Howard converting that spare, that can have a lot of effect. It can have a little effect on Scott. Scott feeling that he should have missed it. And as far as Howard's concerned, he thought he missed it, and he still made it. This may be just what he'll need to get himself out of here the winner. Scott in the 5th, looking for his first strike. There it is. So at the end of 5, here in the 3rd and final game, 5 frames to go. It's Howard, 98 spare. Scott, 67, and he's on a big strike. Scott now moving in on the left side. Here's a big strike for this fella. Trying to protect a 31-pin advantage with 5 frames to go. He was on top of that one, and he's not going to get away with it, the 2 and the 5. Don's having trouble over there on the left side, Pat.
You're right, Fred. He's, as you say, over the top of the ball. I think his thumb is coming out too fast for him. And then to get the ball up over the foul line, he's kind of twisting over with his fingers.
Well, here we look at the 2-5 again. He covered it. He covered it. Didn't lose any pins and counts. Right now, those counts seem quite important. 31 pins. Scott out in front. He's 87 with a spare in the 6th, and Howard now in the 6th. That'll get there. Solid 10, and George can't afford that. We noticed Don talking to his wife, Velma. Pat, I believe that she has told him something.
Probably asking for instructions, huh, Fred?
Yes, when you go to your wife for instructions, you're really in trouble. At the 10 pin, Howard. No doubt about that. That was a big strike for Howard, going over here with a chance for a double. So we go into the 7th. The margin, 32 pins, 4 frames to go. $1,000 to the winner. Howard now with the turn. Be careful. On the nose. Breaks up the 3-10, nothing but the 3 pin. And Howard's not going to catch Scott unless he starts getting some strikes.
I think Georgie's a little unhappy, Fred. He just can't get to the foul line right.
I believe that solid 10 took a lot of his enthusiasm away. Probably would have gone to the left with a little more desire to get the strike. So for Howard, it's 136, fair in the 7th, and Don needs a double to just about wrap this up. Almost a 4-5.
Yeah, he dropped that one, Fred. Rolled all the way, but nothing on it. There's been a lot of 5 pins on this 26 lane. The alley doesn't finish quite as much as 25, so if you're not quite solid, you'll leave a few 5 pins.
At the 5. I've never seen that. It's quite unusual to me to see a bowler shoot at what is the easiest spare, the 5 or the 4, and he shoots the 5 pin from the extreme left side.
You're right, Fred. Most bowlers, even though they're playing the inside angle, will move a little right for the 5 pin on their spare shots, but Don seems to move farther left. He threw that one nice. Oh, it's going to hook too much.
On the Brooklyn, leaves the 6 pin, and Don's having trouble finding that strike zone. So there's room for Howard, and Don is certainly giving George an opportunity to pull this one out, but George can't seem to pick up the strikes he wants. He started with 3, left a 7 pin, then a solid 10, followed with a 10, and he was on the nose in the 7th. 6 pin covered by Scott. So this is about the last opportunity that Howard is going to have. He needs 2 strikes badly here in the 8th and 9th. And he still has room for bonus money. How about that one, Pat? Solid 10
How
again.
about that? What's a killer?
Can you do?
It's kind of disheartening, Fred, when you know you've got to have them, then you hit it right solid in the pocket and leave that 10 pin.
So it'll be about the same thing that George had in his last 2 turns on the lanes. He had a solid 10 on the right, went over to the left side, a little bit disappointed, and of course, this makes a difference. He's got the spare. Well, a groan from the crowd. They thought Georgie got that one out a little too far, but he had enough lift on it to bring it back. So we go into the 9th frame. The margin is now 32 pins. There's still room.
He has to hit here, Fred. There's no other way.
All right. Well, let's call it 235. So Georgie with a big strike going for him in the 9th. 175 in the 8th. A potential 235. So Scott needs 174 to make sure of a victory. Solid 10. Things now are evening up. We can't kick that 10 pin out of here on the right side.
Yeah, a strike there would have been a big one. Would have just about sold it up, or we gave him a cinch tie, even if he got 9 out in the 10th frame.
Scott actually needs 2 spares for 174. There's one of them. So Scott can now shut out Howard with a mark here in the 10th frame. Howard going all the way for 235 will not be enough. It'll give him 630. Scott with 180 would have 637. He's on a spare in the 9th. He needs a mark. Don Scott from Cleveland, Ohio, making his first appearance on championship bowling, a winning one if he converts this spare.
Well, he's got an easy one to shoot at, Fred.
Well, he had a solid 10 here on the right, and a good pocket hit on the left, leaving the 4. Seems like his chances are pretty good here for a spare. There it is. So Don Scott has turned in a victory here in Akron, Ohio on championship bowling. A $1,000 win. Both these boys will be seen again meeting different opponents. It's total pins for the 6 games in their 2 appearances that will qualify our 2 finalists with a $15,000 added purse. 183. He's got it. 183. And that should give Scott around 640 unofficially, as Georgie Howard moves in on the right side with a chance for 630. I'll see if George can leave another solid 10 here, Pat. He's had 2 in a row. He's in again. This time the 4 pin. What are you going to do?
He tightened up just a little bit to carry the 10, so he left the 4, Fred. 4s and 10s.
There's a bowler, Pat, a pro bowler, as we talk about these fellas. They're all the greatest in the game. When you're leaving 10 pins, do you change your angle at all, or do you just stay there and keep firing?
Well, Fred, I think it's occurring how you're leaving them. If they're solid 10s, you almost have to stay there. But if it's a half pocket 10, you will move to try to hit a little bit solider.
Well, Howard, talking to himself out there, he can't understand what's going on. He's had a pretty good game here. He started with 3, left a 7, and he's left 3 10 pins and a 4 pin for 215 with a count.
This is a free ball, Fred. This will carry.
Well, he left a 6 pin. Howard winning the last game. 214 to 183. Howard with 609. Scott with 640. This is Fred Wolf along with Pat Patterson. We're in Akron, Ohio, championship bowling, and we'll be back and have a word or two with these 2 fellas and just see what happened out there while they've been trying to get the big score. From the Firestone Lanes in Akron, Ohio, where the World Series of Golf is played annually. Here are the official scores for George Howard: 212, 183, and 214. The total is 609. For Don Scott, 212, 245, and 183. The total 640. Did you enjoy this one, ladies and gentlemen? Well, George, the loser's share, $500.
Well, sorry, thank you, Freddie.
Not as good as winning.
You
but
can't win them all, and I want to congratulate Donnie for bowling so wonderful for his first time on championship bowling. I think he did a tremendous job.
Thank you very much. There you are, Don. You're cashing in $250 bonus money for 5 in a row. What happened on the 6th one there? Did it get a little heavy after you get the 5th one?
Yeah, all of them were heavy.
All of them were heavy. You did a great job. That'll make it look better. $1,000 as the winner.
That's the good part.
How do you feel now that it's over?
Well, I'm still nervous, but
You're still nervous?
This will help by the time.
Oh, when you get in the finals a few weeks from now, when the purse gets up to $15,000, give some thought to that. Thank you very much, boys. Let's give them a nice Akron welcome here, boys. Sure hope you can join us again next week here on Championship Bowling, television's #1 bowling show from the Firestone Bowlerama Lanes in Akron, Ohio. Championship Bowling with the world's greatest bowlers, over $70,000 in prizes. So until next week, this is Fred Wolf just saying, keep 'em bowling out there. It's great. Matching shirts and slacks used on Championship Bowling by King Louie. Championship Bowling is sanctioned by the American Bowling Congress, and we wish to thank AMF for their cooperation in helping us to produce Championship Bowling.